All right, hello, my third and fourth graders. When we had our back to school bash, I gave you a little Ziploc bag that contains some watercolor paper and a package of salt and a tray of watercolors. Now, I don't have one of those trays. I've got a bigger one of mine, but you have something similar that you were given at the back to school bash. And so I need you to make me a promise right now that what you're going to do is you're going to watch the entire video, then turn it off, and then go somewhere far, far away from your electronics to do this, because we're going to be using water, and I don't want you to have water or paint anywhere near your electronics, okay? So you watch what I do, then turn your video off and go to your kitchen table or someplace away from your electronics before you do this, because we don't want any water or paint around any of your devices. Not your phones, not your laptops, not your iPads, not your Chromebooks, okay? So promise me right now that you are not going to get this paint or water anywhere near an electronic device. I want you to be able to paint. It is horrible that we can't do anything like this during the pandemic. Even my in-person students, I've not figured out yet how I'm going to be able to paint with them because of the way that we are having to social distance, and we have to share supplies, and I would have to clean and sterilize the brushes. I'm having to go into the classrooms, and I can't do that right now with paint. I would make too big a mess. So you're getting to paint at home, and so I need you to promise me that you will keep it away from everything else. So what you're going to do is you'll use a pencil. I'm using a marker just for the paper here so it shows up on the video. And I want you to divide one. I gave you 2 watercolor papers. We're just using one today. Divide one into 3 sections. Okay? On this one, I want you to write the words wet on wet. In the middle, I want you to write wet on dry. And in the last one, I want you to write salt. Okay? So you're going to divide it into 3 sections with a pencil. You'll say wet on dry, salt. So usually when you are a 3rd or 4th grader, I show you some watercolor techniques. And I want to be able to do that with you even though you are at home. So you're going to need a small container with a little bit of water in it. Don't get you a big old glass. You probably can do this with just the lid off the water bottle, just the top. Turn the top up and put a little bit of water in it. That's all you're going to need. The paints that I sent you come with a brush inside of it, so you can pull that brush out. You're going to need a paper towel or a Kleenex of some kind so that you can wipe your brush off to get the excess water off of it, all right? Now, put the salt over to the side for right now. And I'm going to teach you a technique called wet on wet. So you're going to get your brush really, really wet. You can rake some of that off. Put it in the water again. You don't need it sopping wet. You just want some wet on your brush. And I want you to paint a little square or a rectangle here. Paint it with your water. So your paper is going to be wet. That's the first wet listed here. Your paper is wet. Now pick one of the colors. Probably be best if you do your red. Let me slide over till I get to my reds. Pick a red. Your brush should just be barely wet, but it will pick up color. It will pick up a lot of it, I promise. And when you put a wet brush on wet paper, I want you to see what it does. I hope this shows up on the camera really well. Can you see that explode and go off in like a tie-dye looking color? It picks up what's already there and it just explodes out onto the paper. And it makes it look like tie-dye. Okay? So that's wet on wet. Now clean your brush out really, really good. and get the water out of it. Okay? And now we're going to use a wet brush on dry paper. So wet brush, take it into your paint just a little bit. I hope you can see me doing that. Take it into your paint just a little bit. And then just paint you some squares on here. I'm going to make mine a little bit darker. Do you see the difference? When it's wet on wet, we get a more scattered to the paint because the wet water combines with the water that's already on the paper and it just seeps out. This way you can control it better. When you're wanting to control where the paint goes, you do the wet on the dry. If you want it to have the effect of being scattered, you do the wet on wet. Okay? Now I'm going to clean out my brush again. Dry it off again. Now I'm going to go back with that same red. I'm going to do just like I did on the wet on dry. I'm going to paint me a square. And if yours is not coming out a real pretty color, that means you got your brush too wet. You want more paint than you have water on your brush. Takes some practice to get the right amount of paint on there. Now we're going to clean out our brush and wipe it off so it dries. And now we're going to open the salt packet because I want you to see this technique that artists use. The salt has a chemical reaction on the paint. All right, and I've sprinkled all my salt on there. And now I'm just going to put this over here and I'm just going to let it sit. So you will need to let this sit and dry. If you pick this up, what happens to water if it's on a plate and you pick up the plate? The water goes running off. So you want to leave this sitting flat, again, away from all electronics or anything in your house that you can get in trouble with getting paint or water on. And I just want you to let that sit. Let it sit for probably 15-20 minutes and then you're going to come back and look at it. Okay? Then I want you to take a picture of it and send it to me. Like, take a sheet of notebook paper and write your name and your school name and your grade. And then lay this on top of that notebook paper and take your picture for me. Or if you're turning it in at work in the school drop box, make sure that you put it in an envelope and tell me who you are. Get your name written on this somewhere so I can see that it's you after it's dried. And I want to see that you've done all 3 techniques here. You're going to be really, really excited when you see what the one with the salt looks like. I'm going to try to raise this up so you can see it. Can you see how it's bubbling? It's not actually bubbling, but it gives the effect of the paint as if it has bubbled. And so artists will use that sometimes depending upon what they're trying to achieve in the texture of what they're doing. Like sometimes if you were doing like a galaxy picture and you wanted it to look like it was out in outer space, you might use this technique. So I just want you to be aware of those 3. Again, I wish we were in person doing it. I'm trying to be very creative and come up with a way I can do it with my in-person students. I might just have to pull them one at a time and do it during my planning period or something like that so they can have this experience. I hope you still have your supplies that we gave you at the Back to School Bash and that you're able to do this little watercolor experiment. There'll be a second one that you'll use your second sheet of paper for, so be watching for that. Have a good night.